Honestly, like moving to Egypt, everyone tells me like, "Oh, that must have been such a culture shock." I didn't really like consciously experience that so much.
Thank you so much for coming on CNL Media. It finally happened after months and months. But can you give us a brief summary of you, basic info, like your hobbies, where you're from, yeah, just like the general.
Basic to you is not basic to me, but we can get into that actually if you want to. But
also state your name as well.
Yeah, I'm Tira Olkdari, and I am a filmmaker, I guess. I mean, I do a lot of roles in filmmaking, but people always tell me I just do a lot. So like I'm doing a lot of writing, but historically I've done like editing, sound design, producing. I'm trying to get more into directing. Oh, I do a lot of graphic design and like social media marketing. Like I do a lot. So I think just in general it's good to say I'm an artist or filmmaker or whatever. And I currently live in Philadelphia. Shout out to Philly. I moved here to attend Temple and graduated with a bachelor's. And I just kind of stayed here ever since. Before that, I lived in Cairo, Egypt. As you know, you visited once. You made a vlog, and then from your vlog, I made a documentary. You can search it up, actually. It's called How Do You Document Home? It's on the Babyllion Studios YouTube channel. Yeah, I lived there for 8 years. I moved there when I was like 11, I want to say. Maybe 10. And so... yeah, I graduated high school there. And before that, I lived in Decatur, Alabama. And before that, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. But yeah, it's kind of contentious whether or not I'm from any of these places. Like, you could say I am, but at the same time, am I? Like, I actually had a conversation with you earlier in our friendship where I was like, just because you're born somewhere doesn't mean you're from there. And you disagreed originally. And you said that, well, I'm born in Lancaster. I'm from Lancaster, same thing. And I said, well, I would never tell anyone else from Birmingham, Alabama, because that's just like really don't have much connection there. I do have like some family there now, but on a cultural, spiritual level, I don't feel that much connection to it. And then I bounced around a lot, so it's kind of hard to say like where I really am from. It's more so like where I have lived previously. That's the spiel.
How was moving around so much, moving to these different locations so often?
Honestly, like moving to Egypt, everyone tells me like, oh, that must have been such a culture shock. I didn't really like consciously experience that so much. I think the way I coped with it as a kid was just like I kind of started living a different life, clean slate and all. It wasn't until I visited America again like 2.5 years later and went to Alabama that I realized how much I had changed. And that honestly was more of the culture shock of like, oh, I'm not the kid I used to be anymore. And that like really fucked with me and like set me back mentally, I feel. But yeah, like living in Egypt, I didn't experience so much of like that culture shock. Like I had other sort of I guess like depressions or anxieties that came with different things I was experiencing along that move, but like culture shock I would never point out and say like I experienced that. It helps that just being young you're more adaptable, I guess. So yeah, and then I moved to Philadelphia, and then I knew immediately like, oh, I'm different. Like having to explain that I lived in Egypt to people, that made me become like the subject of a lot of like attention. People were like, oh, guess where this person's from, A lot of people were very confused why I came to Philadelphia, and that was really funny. Sophie Stringer, actually, during orientation, she was like, why would you come here? But I did, for some reason. Yeah, that was a hard move, I would say. Especially because when I first planned to go to college, I knew I would come back to Egypt frequently because my parents and brother would still be there. But then they, unfortunately, had to move back to America too. And so I was like, I don't know if I'll ever get to go back. I've only been back once since going to Temple. That was a hard transition, just knowing like this place that I considered my home for a long time, I may never be able to go back. That was difficult. It's funny because like, you see me and you don't think any differently of me. Like, I think a lot of people would say the same. It's like, oh, this is just another American that I know in America, whatever. But it's like every now and then certain pop culture things would come up that I had no idea about, and people would be like, what the fuck? How do you not know that? Like, have you been living under a rock? And it's like, I live elsewhere. Like, I don't know. Trends like take longer to get to us, Shit like that would always come up, but it never became a big thing, So yeah.
How does those emotions kind of fuel the documentary that you made and ended up getting into a showcase for Temple?
Yeah, I got into Diamond Dogs. I want to say it was 2021. Yeah. Wow. That was the first film I feel like I put my all into that, got like really showcased like on that scale. And that was a big deal. I was dealing with like a lot of issues mentally just on my own, like returning to Egypt. Like there was a lot to process after all that time. And then when you all came, 4 of my roommates, all came to visit me in Egypt for, what was it, like a couple of weeks? Yeah. I had a lot of difficulties processing that because it was like I was doing all these like touristy things with you and I didn't want to feel like a tourist because it's a place I considered my home. But a lot of people will look at me, see my, my skin color, for example, my hair, and be like, okay, yeah, that's, a tourist. And it's like I had a lot of difficulties processing that. And you made a vlog. And watching that vlog made me realize, like, oh, you just don't see this place the same that I do. And so I wanted to make a documentary taking your footage and wanting to show what it felt like to experience home. But then as I was doing it, I was like, I felt like I was failing. And that was really hard to feel like no matter how I arranged things, you could never actually see what it meant to have Egypt as a home. And then I kind of realized, like, that's just not how it works. Like, you can't document home. That was like, that's why it's titled that way. How do you document home? Is essentially my answer was you can't really. Like, when it's filmed and on playback, it's like you can only see the spectacle. You see the pyramids and the different culture. You're like, wow, that's different. But to me, it's like I don't even think of those aspects as home. I think of like the feeling of sand in my hair and like the heat, the dry heat. Like, those are the things like I miss. And people will make fun of me for that. But like, it's true. Those are the sensations I get that make me miss that so much. So like that's why I wrote at the very beginning and at the very end like those thoughts and feelings to kind of show you that like what you see in this footage is not what I see. So it's impossible to document home because I can never turn it around or like hand it out to you guys for you to experience what that means. But then there are a lot of international students and like people from Puerto Rico, for example, my friend Gabe, who watched that and they brought them to tears because they know what that's like to like travel such a distance to go to college. And even like Gabe had some of his roommates and some of his friends visit him in Puerto Rico and he was like thinking of my documentary the entire time. He told me, and I was like, yeah, that's how it is. Like they experience it so differently and there's no way to like really show them. I guess like this is the gist of it. Like I hope I explained that well.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I was just about to bring up the Gabe interaction as well and ask, does that kind of just like play in the role of kind of like why you got into like film and everything, or like kind of like express like how does that like make you feel as like a filmmaker or like within this field of being a creative, like those types of interactions that you're seeing like actually like impact people's lives? Like
no, yeah, at the time I was really struggling with figuring out what my voice was because I hadn't like really come to terms with like gender identity and other shit. So when I released that and people responded to it, I was like, oh, okay, I do have a voice. I just need to keep like searching for it and like finding ways to bring it out of myself. And that took time, I think that takes time for everyone, no matter like who you are. Yeah, that was very encouraging to like know that I'm not just a filmmaker, because I was doing all these like logistical or like technical things within film as far as like sound design, editing, producing. Those were my focuses through a lot of college. But at that point I was starting to consider like what if I could also be the storyteller, like the creative person behind some of these things. And that's what kind of led me eventually to getting to screenwriting more. As I came to terms with the gender identity of it all, I started writing like scripts about that. Then I won an award and I was like, oh, maybe I could actually like do this for real, like not just as a hobby, but like this could be like what I actually do. And I had like teachers that encouraged me to do that as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past 2 years is like explore that more. How do I get my voice out there for people to care about and respond to, because that's important. Yeah, I think it's a big reason why I'm still in film, because originally I just kind of chose on a whim, as you know. Yeah, I did like graphic design and I was in yearbook and I helped with the newspaper in high school. Even before that I was doing a lot of theater, a lot of acting, and people thought like, from one of these things that's what I do in college, and I just chose something else on a whim just because I love exploring new things, new art forms, everything. So yeah, at the time I was just like still trying to figure out like what is my role here, and I just wanted to support all the creatives as I could and like be the technical or logistical person behind those things. And then eventually I realized like, no, I can also be the storyteller as well, which makes so much sense. Like looking back, like I would always write stories as a kid, like stuff like that. Like, looking back, it's like I was always, destined to choose that route. But it's also good that I was able to work on those other things, the technical and logistical stuff, because now I know how to do those things and I can still be involved with other people's projects while also telling my own stories. And ultimately that's what I want. I want to be involved and I want to stay productive. I just want to keep working. Like when you ask like what my hobbies are, it's like literally what I'm trying to make my profession is my hobby. And then a lot of people say that in the arts, but like I really mean it. Like I don't play video games. Like when I have downtime, I watch shows and movies. But like so does everyone. But to me, that's also education. Like I learn from those things as well. So I'm constantly thinking about media and how to be a better storyteller and how to be a better, I guess, professional in the arts as well. Not that I care as much about that as the storytelling aspect, but it's still important. Yeah.
I feel like every time I do interviews, I always get so ahead of myself because I always like jump to like kind of later your like current like artists, what they're currently doing and working on and everything.
Right.
And I always forget, or I always want to like bring it back all the way back to your theater days. How did you kind of fall in love with theater and like the creative arts, and then your transition into graphic design and then into film, like kind of explain that whole like journey of transitioning into different mediums throughout that.
So my first experience with the arts growing up was like worship in church. My mother was pretty involved with that, and so like that was like my first love was music. And my dad like would put me on to like a lot of like rock and other type of music from 80s, 90s, for example. And even like current stuff too at the time, like early 2000s. Like he was pretty up to date as well. You know, I really loved exploring different types of music through my parents, you know, whether that be, you know, them in church or them as, you know, just people listening to whatever contemporary stuff was out. And then I went to a magnet school called Benjamin Davis that focused a lot on the arts. It wasn't like all about it, but like they had programs dedicated to it that you could do if you wanted to. I was like, whatever, I'll try it. And then I went to Leon Sheffield, which was like the partner school. Like Benjamin Davis was like 1st to 2nd grade, Leon Sheffield was like 3rd through 5th. And once I got to Leon Sheffield, they actually did like full-on musicals. And so in 3rd grade, I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. And I was a Munchkin in The Wizard of Oz. That was my first ever role. Which, and fun fact, I always love to say this, the Princess Theater is what it's called in Decatur, Alabama. That's where I performed my first musical, which is on the same street that Brittany Howard of the Alabama Shakes performed her first gigs growing up, because she didn't live in Decatur, but she lived pretty close to it, and there's like a bar there. So yeah, I love Brittany Howard. Even before I actually knew she was from like where I grew up, I always found that really cool because she's like a powerful queer woman, you know. Like I love it. Very artistic and has a strong voice and sense of like artistry. So and then like after that I did like High School Musical. I was like a basketball player, and then like going into 5th grade I was supposed to get a lead role in, I want to say it was Grease. We were supposed to do Grease, but then I moved. And so yeah, that's kind of just how I got started. I also was in like the art club, the music club. Yeah, I just kind of learned just because that was available, like, oh, this is what I like to do, which is why there should be, you know, arts programs in every school at like a big scale too, like not just like flirt around with it and just like, you know, have it there just on the side, but like actually like commit to it. I think that's really important for kids to express themselves. And yeah, I know I really needed that growing up, that outlet, especially in Alabama where like growing up as a boy, it's like sports, you know, but it was never like stigmatized in a way. It was like, oh, the artsy stuff was for girls. Like I knew a lot of boys in those schools that loved to also be in the arts club and shit like that. Like there's never that kind of divide. Yeah, that stigma. So that was really cool. Going to Egypt, I just kept doing it. Yeah, I remember I was actually Hamlet in 6th grade, and it's like I knew nothing of what I was actually saying, but like I learned all my lines. Like I did that shit. I don't know how, but then my teacher was like, you should actually do like the plays and musicals we do. I was too shy to like audition in 6th grade, but they had an open role. Someone had dropped out, and he was like, you should do this. So I was Bushy Trot and Nancy Drew, some Nancy Drew play. And it was really funny because I'm just like this tiny, scrawny 6th grader trying to play like this villain in a Nancy Drew thing, and like all the 8th graders were like, are you gonna be able to do this? Like give your best like menacing, you know. And I was like, okay. But then like they were really supportive, and they like brought it out of me, and then I made a lot of friends through that, so I just kept at it. And I was actually the first person to complete every drama class in middle school, because they had a lot of them. They had like comedy, they had a comedy designated one, they had like stagecraft, for example. Yeah, they had a lot of different things, and I just wanted to try it all, so that's what I did. And I also helped with like stagecraft on musicals. Like I did a lot of Spotlight, but then eventually I fell out of it because of social shit. I felt like I was getting a lot of attention as like an actor, and I wasn't an extrovert by any means at that time, but people like, oh, you're an actor, you must be. And like there was a lot of like weird pressure that came with that, and so like I I couldn't take the heat, essentially. It was really funny. There was this high school actor that I really looked up to, and he came to my last ever performance in 8th grade, and he told me, like, never stopped acting. And funnily enough, that was the last time I ever acted. Which I do regret. I wish, like, I don't think it would be something I would have, like, really committed to, but I wish I, like, just kept doing it, you know, because I had friends doing it. It would have been nice, but yeah, I just stopped doing it. And then eventually in high school, my English teacher talked to me about joining yearbook to write for the yearbook, because he was really adamant that I should become a writer. I was like in 10th grade and I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, whatever. Like, I didn't care. But I was like, fuck it, I'll join yearbook. That seems easy. And then when I joined, I had a friend named Gray. Shout out to Gray Lewis. I hope you're doing well. Who was like the graphic designer, like the editor-in-chief, and Miss Pytak, the teacher. Miss Pytak wanted me to become a photographer. There are all these different teachers in my life that wanted me to become different things, and I always ignored them. But I clearly wasn't taking to photography in the way that she would have liked, because she liked my photography, but I just wasn't committing to it. She was like, how about you go join Gray? Gray could use like friends also doing graphic design with him. So I was like, just go join him, have fun, you know? I was like, okay. And that's how I got into graphic design. I just started doing it for the yearbook, and I was like, wait, I actually really fuck with this. And like, that was my hobby for like a couple of years. Just like, I downloaded this thing called like, you know, like Microsoft Paint? Yeah. There's like a version of that that's like a little bit more complex that you can download for free. And that's how I learned how to do like digital art. And then eventually I got the Adobe software, and then I learned Photoshop and InDesign and a little bit of Illustrator, and that's how I got into that. And I became one of the editor-in-chiefs of the yearbook in senior year, and I became the newspaper designer, because after Gray graduated, it was like, okay, who do we turn to now? And Gray suggested me, luckily. So that's how I got into that. Then my Miss Pytak was like, okay, then you should become a graphic designer. And she was like telling me all these different schools I should go to. And I was like, no. I'm gonna go to Temple University and do film. Like, yes. And everyone was like, what? But yeah, that's what I chose to do for some reason. I honestly don't even remember what my mindset was. I just really wanted to try something new. And that's why, as you know, like, I didn't play around with cameras that much in film school, because that was like the one aspect of filmmaking that I did have experience with, was just like, you know, using a camera for like photography, not video or film, obviously, but like still, I was like, I want to really try something new. So yeah, that's how we eventually got here. Awesome. Long answer. I give very long answers. I hope that's fine.
No, that's perfect. With you kind of like changing throughout like different mediums of art, how do you think that you being able to like change throughout different mediums, how do you think that has helped you with your artwork today, of being like working on whether it's a script or a film? Like, how does that ease of being able to change quickly with like the mediums and everything, and like the ability of like, oh, this is interesting to me, let's go over here. Like, does that make any sense?
No, it does. Yeah, cool. I think, I get asked this question a lot, especially when I was making the transition of becoming a screenwriter from sound design. I had teachers that would always ask me, like, how do you feel like sound design has helped you write screenplays, like, if at all? And I would just say, like, I'm just very conscientious of like the soundscape. I think if you read my scripts, you'll be surprised to see how much like sound really takes a role and is even its own character at times in my scripts. And I think that's just what it is. You just become more conscientious of like what really goes into film, because film, there's so much that goes into it. There's art, there's music, there's logistics, there's all these different moving pieces. I really believe that no matter who you are, you could become a filmmaker, like join the film industry. I think anyone has a talent that can be applied to the film industry. I really maintain that belief, because people have been converted into filmmakers in wild ways before. So yeah, I think just being able to explore all these different avenues and these different mediums allows me to appreciate what other people are doing on these films, you know, people outside my own role. Like, I get to understand it better. I get to be more conscientious of it. Like, I get to stick up for other people a lot more, because, you know, sometimes a producer that is not too familiar with the process of maybe like sound design would be like, oh, what if, because there's like a crowd coming in, what if we all like stamp our feet to like simulate a crowd? And I was like, I was on a set like this, and I was like, don't do that. The sound designer will hate you. What the focus is we want to get the dialogue as clear as possible, and we'll figure out the stomping later. Don't mess with the dialogue, essentially. That's what I told him. It's like, had I never done sound design, I would have never known that, and I maybe I would have been the producer to suggest that on a set. I think it's important just to like spread your wings and explore all those different things so you can have a better idea of like how you're going to have people join your film and shit like that. Be a better ally to their work and their artistry. And also I just love it. I love doing those things. It's not like I just do it as a chore and just to know how to do it. It's like I actually genuinely enjoy doing those things and learning new things. At one point I was coding. Like there's a whole year where I got obsessed with coding. What else? I mean, there are all these different things where like my parents knew that I was coding, and so they were looking into like coding summer camps that I could do. And I was like, never mind, I'm over it now. A lot of my teachers really wanted me to join like the math squad that would like do like competitions and stuff. Like, and I was like, no, I don't want to do it. It's like there's just all these different things that like I would obsess over for short periods of time and then just move on from as I was waiting to really like find my thing. And I think overall, like, film is it for me, film and TV. And I still think I can do multiple things within that. Right now I'm focusing on screenwriting, and I hope that really becomes a long-term thing for me. But if it doesn't, I still feel like there's other avenues for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like that's like, film is the best for that ADHD like mentality of having so many like different like fixations, because there's so many like interesting things within film that you can dive into, and just like art in general with like different mediums that you can go into, and it's really cool just to go in between each one, and then you can like succeed in each part and like see success or see your hard work pay off. And that's why I got into film and everything.
Yeah.
And it's like so cool to hear it from your perspective too, of like also like that's like when we first met in early in freshman year and everything. I think that's what like I related to you the most, is just like you're interested in graphic design, but you're also like wanting to do, I don't know, like experimental short films, and then but you also wanted to be like an actor within Josh and Claudia's first film and everything. And I just was like that.
I'm just down to do anything. I never went into college thinking like, oh, I need to start a music podcast, but like that was one of the first things I did. It just like came up like, oh, we should do this, and like I committed to that. Like I made all the branding, and like I figured out how to use mics and edit sound. It's very shitty, going back and listening to it, I'm like, oh god. But I was committed to learning, and I was committed to fucking up and learning from that.
Now I want to, before going into more of the artwork, because I do want to dive into a little bit of Tunes for Two and sound design and everything, but you mentioned your gender identity and everything.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about you transitioning and recently within the last year and everything, and being on HRT and everything, and just your experience coming out as trans and everything.
Right.
And just like your experience, especially, just experience with that.
Experience has been up and down, to be honest. I was thinking about this earlier because we watched Will and Heartburn yesterday, which is about Will Ferrell and Will Ferrell's friend / former SNL writer Harper Steele, who transitioned being a woman in her 60s. And I was thinking about that a lot, and like I think what keeps people from doing that sooner sometimes is there's a socio-political aspect to it. There's a lot of fear-mongering around that. We become the subject of a lot of different things. Some people would even say we're the cause of the division in America, and that's one of the reasons that people don't pursue this route for so long, even though like everyone would have wished that we did it sooner. Like I think about that all the time. It's like, oh, why didn't I just do this earlier? But I really do believe there's a reason for everything. Like you get to it when you get to it, and you the fact that we get there at all is a miracle. Sometimes like people, not to get too grim, but like people don't ever get to make it to that point because they suffer from depression, and then they choose an alternative that is unfortunately way too common. It's just a miracle that we ever even get to the point in our lives that we can choose that route, considering the current climate of like how that is perceived, especially in America. And so I was thinking about it a lot, and it's like it's one thing to want to thrive as like a trans person, but you also, in order to accomplish that, you need to know how to survive as one. And like that's kind of what I witnessed in that documentary, and in my own life as well, is like we do this because we want to thrive as this as this person that we want to be and we know is in us deep down, but it's like on top of that there's all this bullshit that we have to deal with, and it's like, okay, we also need to know how to survive as this person. And a lot of people unfortunately just be like, then why do it at all? It seems like a hassle, like, you know, but it's important, you know, like we have to do this, you know, there's no other option in my head at least. So I kind of knew that, I mean, even going as far back as elementary school, I always knew like something was different. I always felt othered for whatever reason, and I tried desperately to fit in. That's the one thing that bugs me a lot, is like I could have maybe gotten to this revelation sooner had I not tried so desperately to fit in, but I really did. Like, yeah, I tried to win the appreciation or admiration of like other boys, you know, in my age range growing up. I feel like that really set me back, but at the same time, like, it happens. So I knew as far back as elementary school, and then I started actually like toying around with the idea in like high school and like let other people know about it. Like, that was on my mind. I don't know, I wasn't sure if like it was something I would actually pursue, but it was just on my mind, and so people knew about that. And then I kind of just ignored it towards the end of high school, and then also through college for the most part. And then at some point I came to terms with my queerness, and then I was like, okay, maybe I'm just non-binary. And then eventually it was like, you know, I got to the realization, like, okay, I can't put it off anymore. Like, this is who I am. So it was a difficult path, especially coming from like, you know, being a pastor's kid, for example, and like growing up in the church and like really a part of the church, like really integrated into it. And then also like being born in Alabama and then living in Egypt, like that comes with its own set of difficulties. And even now it's like working through the trauma of that. Even in Philadelphia, like nowhere is perfect. Like everyone, I think there are some people that like to pretend that like, oh, if you just move to this city, you won't have to deal with shit. It's like, no, I still do, you know, even in these very liberal, you know, blue voting cities, it's like, I deal with that all the time, but I'm much better about handling it and navigating it now than I was like, let's say like this time last year. You know, last year was difficult wrapping my head around that, but now it's cool, much happier. In general, I feel a lot lighter.
Oh, that's amazing.
I think that was like a common thing people would tell me, is like I kind of brought this heaviness with me wherever I went. They could feel that, you know, not everyone would say that, but you know, certain people, and I would be like, why is that? And then, you know, now I know why. It's like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, you know, for so long. I don't know. What else do you want me to say?
Well, that was perfect. What has this like past year kind of brought up for you? Finally coming to like who you are, like as a person, and like just like that freeness of like, this is who I am, and this is like, yeah, that just like process of like finally fitting into and feeling comfortable in the skin that you are in.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a process, you know, and it's not like a gradual one. Like, it's a very up and down one. Like, I started HRT in February and then had to go off of it. It's actually really funny. You haven't seen the movie yet, I don't think, but I saw the TV Glow. It's an allegory for transness, and a lot of people came out of that movie actually having like this revelation of like, oh, I might be trans, because they saw that movie, and like that was like a common thing I ended up seeing in like Letterboxd reviews and shit like that. But for me, it was like, I gotta get off HRT. And it was for other reasons. It was just like, when I was in that theater, I had so much anxiety that day particularly, and I ended up realizing it was because of other meds I was on that was causing that. And then also I had to stop drinking caffeine, and that ended up helping. So it was like all these different things. I was like, okay, yeah, I can't combine this with hormones, and basically going back into puberty is essentially what it is. So yeah, I had to re-navigate that over the summer, and I fell into a depression. I was like, maybe there's no way out, you know? And then eventually I just came back to it in September, and I was like, okay, I'm going to restart it, and hopefully it'll be different this time. And it has been. You know, I came to it with a different mindset. Everything works differently per person. Like, I was suggested to like keep a journal of like that experience of being on HRT back in the, you know, the first time I tried it. And I think being so conscious of it all the time actually messed with me and was actually wrong for me personally. For other people it might work, but like for me, I couldn't do that. So when I started again in September, I just like, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not even going to think about it. And that was much healthier for me, and I'm still on it. So, you know, obviously that's the good thing. That's what you hope for. So I think it's also helped a lot with my artistry, as we kind of alluded to. Like, I found my voice through coming to terms with those things as well. And I get to write about a lot of queer shit. So
hell yeah.
That's lit, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just amazing to see your progression, even like from freshman year, just like seeing your development as a human being is just so cool to see. I just wanted to dive into that and just kind of have an update of like how you're feeling and your experience with that within the last year, because it's been really cool to witness it and everything, and your progression, how you're doing mentally and everything. And it's even like from last year, you just like bright up the room every time you walk into it, and it's just like so cool to see that like
Let's go.
like from the start of last year to the start of this year. It's just like it's like a 180 flip, and it's just like really cool and to see.
Man, shut your ass up.
Fuck you.
Oh, for the record, I want to say I saw The TV Glow as an amazing film. I hope it didn't come across that I didn't like it. I actually really love it. Probably one of the best films I've seen about the trans experience. The other one I would say is 20,000 Species of Bees, which like I don't know if anyone else has heard of that, but I saw it at a film festival once. It's from Spain, and if you can find it by any means, like go watch that. That's like probably the best experience I've ever had in a movie theater. You know, like seeing myself represented on screen, because it's about a kid. Like I saw The TV Glow, they're like middle school, high school, and then going into adulthood. This one's more about like a kid like in elementary school who like knows something is different about them, and they have so much resentment towards like the way gender is like worked into familial values and also within like their community, and they don't know the word for trans, obviously. Like they're just a kid, like they don't know how to describe what they're feeling, but like through the help of like particularly their aunt, they ended up coming to the realization like, oh, I want a different name, for example. You know, it's such a beautiful movie. I highly suggest 20,000 Species of Bees. If you can find it anywhere, do watch it. It's so good. That's what I aspire to do as well, is like just have more representation of people like me on screen for anyone to see, you know, of all ages, and to destigmatize that. And you know, not just as a trans person, but also as someone who lived abroad and came back, you know, I think that's a particular experience that we don't see enough, because like I feel like that's pretty defining in who I am as well. So I'm trying to write about that a little bit too, and we are.
Amazing. And I wanted to ask about like how you watch movies and everything, with having so many different outlets, from sound design, graphic design, editing, like with all these like different like things coming together, like music even too. When you're watching a movie, kind of like what is your thought process? Like what are you thinking about, kind of like analyzing about the film and everything when you do watch a movie? Like what are you kind of like looking for? And as a script writer as well too.
Right.
Yeah, how do you kind of like go through those different mediums while watching a movie?
I find myself really appreciating movies. Like I have a hard time looking at people who are such critics of movies in general, and like commonly give films like less than 3 stars on Letterboxd. Like to me that's just crazy. Like when I watch films, I'm like, the mere fact that this exists is such an amazing feat. Even if it's like maybe not the best film I've ever seen, it's like I still like, I'm in awe of just people pursuing this path and like creativity and all that, like, because so much goes into it. It's a very hard job. So, and I recognize like the importance of criticism as well and like feedback, but like I feel like people take it too far sometimes. And like the most important thing for me is like just to have an appreciation for it. So like, well, usually when I'm watching like a really good movie, I don't analyze it at all. I'm just immersed. At least the first time around, I'm just immersed and I just watch it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then on the second, third watch is when I start to like, okay, this is what they're doing here. But when I'm watching like a movie I don't tend to like on the first time, that's when I become much more aware of like, okay, why is this not sitting well with me? It's like, oh, because they're doing this. Why are they doing that? And I was like, okay, maybe I can understand, but for me personally, my personal taste, I don't like that. And so that's how I kind of developed my own taste as well. Like kind of getting around to knowing like what I want to do with my stuff and what I don't want to do with my stuff is actually by watching bad movies. So like I highly suggest if you want to get into like a certain craft, actually like engage with bad stuff. Try to figure out, not just say like, oh, this is shit, not worth my time, but actually try to engage with it and figure out, okay, why do I think this? Read bad scripts, watch bad movies, all that shit. Like I think that is so important, doesn't get talked about enough. There's like a lot of literary managers that can tell like when screenwriters that are trying to become like professional screenwriters like just aren't aware of that. Like for some reason there's a lot of screenwriters, and I'm at fault for this too. I don't read nearly enough screenplays, but they can tell when like, it's not like a true consumer of what they're also trying to produce. You know what I mean? And so that's like their number one suggestion to aspiring screenwriters is like read scripts. You know, it sounds simple, but like not enough people that aspire to do this actually do that. And don't just read the good ones, read the bad ones. So, yeah.
That's such good advice. I was just waiting for like the motorcycle to shut the fuck up. One of my like core memories of living with you at the Young Bull House was you would listen to like movies, but then like you would just listen to it and like not actually like see the actual like vision, but like just focus in on the sound design.
Would I do this? I don't even remember.
It was like a couple times, but I just remember like whether it's like a movie, you would be like on your phone and you're
I would always
you're on your phone and you'd be like focusing on like audio and everything, kind of like what were you paying attention to while you were doing that, and like paying attention to those like audio pieces, like
I can't say that was super intentional as in like I was doing that for a specific purpose. It was more so I was just a really bad consumer of art at that time and I needed something else. I was so like, you know, I don't know what you call that. Just that sensation of needing to do something on your phone as you're just like idle. I've learned to beat that out. I think especially like going to the movie theater more, like that helps. It's like because you can't be on your phone, so it's like I just pay attention. I think I've become much better at that, and I don't do that at home as much anymore.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I guess there were times where I would try to focus only on the sound design, and sometimes just being on your phone that can help, or you just close your eyes. You know, it's not like a very new thing to do. I know, like, what film was it? I don't know. It was like a really old film, like maybe 40s and 50s, the golden era of like cinema. There was a critic that loved a movie so much that they went like the 10th time seeing it in the theaters and just closed their eyes for the entirety of it and just appreciated that alone. And I was like, I should give that a try. Yeah, what did I learn anything? I don't know. I honestly don't remember. I just like I think I learned more by doing, and I think the things I learn when I'm watching something are more subconscious than conscious. So I think things I do like to look out for is like the presence of like how do sound designers utilize silence. And how does silence sound? Because no, they don't just fucking have no sound. Like they have something there. It's very subtle, but they, you know, especially if you watch Sound of Metal, very important. Like probably if a sound designer was like came to me and was like, what is like the most important movie to watch? You know, to learn about how sound can be incorporated into a film. I don't know if Sound of Metal is my number one, but it's definitely up there. Because it has a lot to do with being deaf, and so like how do you portray deafness in the sound design of a film? It's very cool, very interesting. I love watching that film. Shout outs to the entire crew and cast of that movie. I love them all.
Awesome. I had this little joke going that we went from a PA on Simmer to the director of Simmer, now to this sound design of Simmer.
Right.
What was that process like of doing sound design? That may be too general. I can zone in more if you want me to.
I wish I could find like the pictures of like, because I would take pictures a lot during this process. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Okay. We can also have it. We'll probably have it on the screen.
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
Awesome.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
No, that's not it. I'll find it. Don't worry.
I believe in you.
Yeah, because these are the Simmer session photos that we did. The Belling Studios. I know it's here somewhere.
I don't know why, but I absolutely hate trying to find like photos because I'm always so bad and I always get so distracted and look at other photos that I'm not supposed to be looking at. I'm like, I'm not trying.
I'm seeing all my like animation progress as well when I did that animation class. I miss that shit.
Aww.
Do more of that.
Yeah.
Shit. Oh, I finally found it. Okay, so here you can see this photo. This is how I broke down every scene in Simmer.
Oh my gosh, I remember this on the billboard. I'm like, this is like psychotically so appealing. I'm like, this is like, I don't know how to describe it.
Psychotically so appealing.
Like,
yeah,
I'm like,
that's you right now.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's probably, you guys are going to see on the screen, but yeah, that's like the type of like tedious work that I love doing when editing and everything, and that's like, I also have that like brain cell.
Yeah, and this was just for the environment, because I think that's where I started, was just thinking about, okay, how is the environment going to sound? And so I would write down all my thoughts, and then I'd bring Josh in the room and ask him, like, am I like correct or am I completely fucking wrong?
Mm.
And he would tell me if I was correct, completely fucking wrong. And yeah, I would just get creative with it. Like obviously I had read the script, I was there on set, shit like that, but like I really enjoy working on films where I'm allowed to bring a surrealist element into it and sometimes even surprise the director as far as the direction of the sound design. Not all directors love this, I have come to learn.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think when you bring a sound designer on, prepare for there to be also some creative brainstorming. And I don't think a lot of new directors know that's a thing. They just think sound design is very technical, straightforward, whatever. There is a creativity to it and don't reject it. Try to learn to appreciate it. Yeah, damn, what was my fucking thought process? I was doing so much sound design at the time that it all just kind of blends together. I was really excited to do like Foley recording, which you were my Foley assistant, of course. Your Subaru was also a part of that.
Subaru Impreza 2015.
Yeah, I just wanted to record as much as I could and then, figure out what would get used, what wouldn't. I wanted, because we go in and out of the real world and this like void space that is like, I don't know how Josh would describe it, but I guess like Carter's subconsciousness, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then over all of this is like a poem that Carter wrote. So it was like I wanted aspects of the physical world to then blend into the subconscious and then the physical. Like I wanted it to blend together because we're talking about summer, the first shot is water. Like I wanted it to feel fluid, and like have things like kind of blend together in that sort of sense. What I really wanted was for like a lot of people's vocals to sound very like reverberated and stuff like that, to like show like this sort of like transience in there. Yeah, I really wanted things to feel very like spaced out in the soundscape. Like it's kind of hard to describe, but I had a lot of fun with it, but it was also very hard, I will admit, because like you do a lot of those things and experiment with it, but then you come to learn like just because it's fun to do and is like a good idea doesn't mean it necessarily sounds good either. So like you also have to meet it halfway. It's like, okay, it also still needs to sound good. So it needs to sound like a movie and not whatever the fuck I was playing around with. So yeah, it was a learning curve. I was still like new to sound design, I would say. At that point I hadn't worked on so many projects that like weren't my own, for example, at that point, so I was still learning a lot. People seemed to really like it. People were like, you need to keep doing this, and I was like, I want to quit. So,
yeah, sound design is so brutal. I don't know how you're doing so many different projects at once.
Yeah, it was great. I think I did 4 that semester. I did Inkblot, I did A World Without Me, I think it was called. Simmer.
Did you start at Homecoming then? Or no, that was later. Yeah, that was way later. Yeah.
And then I did Lizzie and Justin.
Oh, that's right.
Not Justin's. Nate's junior thesis. But I was kind of added late to Nathan's, and I only did some of it. But I was still credited. They're very nice about that. Shout out to Nate,
Nate.
Late to the party, I remember.
Nate the homie. How do you go in between multiple projects at once and like being able to like balance that?
Do not take my advice. I was so bad at it. Oh my god, I wanted to quit. Like I said, like after that experience, I was like, I never want to do sound design again. But now I still do. I did Homecoming, which hopefully comes out soon, and I really just wanted to do as much as I could at that point because I was bad at collaborating earlier in college, and I just wanted to join as many films as I could. So like even when I was working on Leslie's junior thesis, I was also the DIT, so I got to be on set. I wanted to do different roles, and I just wanted to work on it as much as I could, even if it was not good for my mental health at the time. But I think it was important. I don't actually regret it. It was just, it made me learn that like, okay, this is not sustainable, obviously. And my employers at Warner Brothers Pictures were not very happy with me about, I could have been a part of the brainstorming of the Barbie marketing campaign, and I chose not to. I chose instead to focus on screenwriting and sound design for theses and my own shit. And a lot of people will tell me I'm crazy for that. But I kind of knew my time at Warner Brothers had come to an end. I had even had a conversation with them, and they were like, "This is probably not what you're going to do in the future, is it?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably not."
What advice would you give to post-production people about working with multiple directors?
Multiple directors.
Or not multiple directors at the same time. I meant like different directors for different projects and like the different ways that they direct and everything. What advice would you give to people in post-production for that?
Communication, working alongside them. I think a lot of directors at that point in post-production just want to hand it off and not deal with it, but that's not the way to go about it. You should have many conversations with them. You should brainstorm with them. Even if the director doesn't necessarily like it, it's so important. and because you gotta get to know what they'll like. It just will make everything easier, and what they expect too. Because like sometimes the things that they expect, they feel like are just such an obvious thing when they're not. A lot of creatives, do that, and so it's just communication. Really, it's just like figure out what type of director they are. Even if you have to ask other people that worked on the movie with them, like it's just communication. Really, I don't really know any other. There's no like hack, just gotta get to know the person. Yeah.
Awesome. Now I want to dive into your screenwriting.
Let's do it.
Now, you're an award-winning screenwriter.
Cheers.
How was the process of writing Cope and that entire process of from the beginning all the way to winning an award for it?
Again, I had done screenwriting 1 in like sophomore year. This was like during COVID. It was all over Zoom, and I hadn't found my voice yet. We've been over that. So like I wasn't happy with what I ended up writing, and I avoided writing for a while after that. It's still a concept I think would be fun to return to, but at the time I didn't have what I needed to like make it good, I guess. And I wasn't attentive enough in class to pay attention to like formatting and shit like that. So that was also an issue. At some point in my senior year, it was actually the summer before, I went to a wedding. And this was like a very pivotal experience, coming to terms with my gender identity, where I had this like conflict with my dad where he suggested I wear a specific thing. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel comfortable for me. And I couldn't explain why at the time because I wasn't, out. And that was the whole thing. And when I was at the wedding, that led to me like really paying attention to, how gender norms are played into even like very secular weddings. Like this wasn't one that was like held at a church or anything, but it was still like gender norms were there, like all the men on one side, all the women on the other side, as far as like bridesmaids and groomsmen, and they wore very distinct things from each other. And it was like that was starting to like make me realize like, okay, there's something very discomforting about this that I don't like, but they don't even realize that because it's just the norm for them. This is just how it's always been. This is the tradition. And so that's when I realized I wanted to write a script about that. And so as soon as we got home, I started like writing all these thoughts and feelings down. And I realized I actually wanted to make like a limited series at first. It was a limited series about different stories from that wedding, because it wasn't just that. There were like all these other things that were happening that I was like, oh, this would make for a good episode. This would also, but I was like, okay, let's just start with one. And I chose like, the one that was from me, my perspective, because that was just the easiest. I think that's how people should start. It's like you don't always have to do that, like write what and like write just from things that are kind of from your perspective, but I think it's a good way to start. It's easy. I joined screenwriting 2, which was taught by Sloan Seal, shout outs, one of my favorite professors I've ever had. And I just paid attention. I locked the fuck in. I was like, okay, like I'm gonna write down everything she has to say about formatting, like what she likes to see in scripts, what she doesn't. And it's so funny because like, this sounds so obvious, but other people in the class, they would just forget these things. And then, we would read their scripts and like, okay. And in my head, I'm like, Sloan won't like that. Sloan won't like that, And it's like, I just was very conscientious of that. In some ways, a little bit of a teacher's pet, whatever. Whenever she gave me feedback, I would respond right away with like questions and like wanting more feedback, wanting clarity. And so she observed that and was like, okay, I need to like really hone in on this. And like, it seems like they're very receptive to getting feedback, so I'm going to give more. She was always very confident that I'd find my way in that process and like figure it out. But it was a little bit of a struggle. Like when we had to pitch our ideas, I like fumbled it so badly. I didn't know how to explain my story. And so that was like step 1. I need to write out all the beats. I need to write this like character bio. Like I need to really figure out what this is about. Because at the time I only knew the inspiration of it. Now I need to figure out what the actual script is going to be about. So once I did that, then everything else was kind of smooth sailing. And I wrote, I think it was originally 20 pages, and then they were like, bring it down to 18. So I did. And yeah, it's about a non-binary person at a traditional sort of wedding. And they have a conflict with their dad, and then they have a run-in with their old youth pastor, and then, these like dysphoric, surreal sequences start to happen and flashbacks and shit like that. So I was really happy with it, but like I didn't know like what it meant to have a good script yet. Like I didn't know what that meant, but my teacher responded really well to it, like saying all the praises, and like my classmates seemed to really like it. So I was like, okay, I'll submit it to this competition with Diamond Screen Film Festival. They had an end of the year like script competition. I was like, I'll just submit it to this and see what happens. And then I ended up winning, and that was you went like you didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I've been
Yeah.
trying to like react. I don't know. I like reacting on camera.
And that was the first like indication of like, oh, I could actually be good at this. Like, because at the time I was like, I'll just write to write this script, and then who knows if I'll ever return to it again. But I did, and then all that happened. I was like, I guess I should just keep going. And I have.
Oh, that's amazing. Now getting to a Mars Apollo, what kind of has that been? How was that process writing that script?
That process was very interesting because it was supposed to be much more collaborative of a writing. It was supposed to be like a writer's room for like a TV show. Like it's a lot of different people. It was me, Sophia, Gladia, and Josh. Because Sophia came up with the story and came to us with it, and we were always going to like take our own episode and write it. But then things got in the way. Like Josh was doing his thesis, for example, and I kind of just asked him all. I was like, can I just write all of them? Like I've got nothing going on this summer. Let me take a crack at it, essentially. So they're like, yeah, fuck it, whatever, go for it. And so that summer when we were in LA is when I like really locked in on that, tried to draft them all. And then when we got back from LA, I met with Josh and Sophia. We went over them and they're like, these seem good. Let's film it. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, essentially, if you don't know what Mars Apollo is, the long title is The Past Tonight with Mars Apollo. It's like a talk show about a guy who's about to graduate college who starts a talk show to essentially interview and somewhat interrogate like all the people from his life that he feels like have wronged him in some way. And it's very confrontational and not like other talk shows, obviously, but it's like a dark comedy. And the pilot episode is on our YouTube channel, Babylon Studios, as well. So give that a look and give me your thoughts. It's just 5 episodes that I wrote, and that's I think all it'll ever be. It's a tight 5, but I think it's a very gratifying 5 episodes. Like there's an arc with it and stuff like that, like in any show. And yeah, I'm happy with it. I don't know. The process was difficult, but I found out that I really like to write comedy, and it's bizarre and it's surreal, and I love that. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So the last time I interviewed you, we were in for Caleb Leon's YouTube channel. We were in the middle of college. It was before we graduated. That was before summer and everything. What has your...
I don't even remember this.
It was like an hour and a half, and it was like when we were doing that puzzle, the David Dobrik puzzle, and we like...
Oh, that.
Yeah, that one.
I mean, technically that's not the...
Oh, I guess
time.
Licia.
Yeah, you and Licia did interview.
Oh, fuck, I forgot about that.
Divorced parents.
Oh my gosh, I like forget all the...
We talked a lot about Egypt and that one.
Yeah. Nonetheless, you're... We're graduated, I guess, is what I was... The long, convoluted way of getting to that you're... We're both graduated now.
Yes,
but
we are.
this was meant to be a beginning question, but I kind of got distracted with questions.
Okay.
But how was your experience going to school at Temple and then graduating and everything? It
was hard. I think I just had a lot of growing up to do. Like I needed to work on myself more than I needed to work on all these projects that I did. Like I'm glad I did all the projects I did, but I think ultimately I could have done a better job at utilizing my resources and, networking and seeking out mentorship and shit like that. Yeah, I just needed to grow up in college. I needed to figure out who I was as a student, a creative, a person. So yeah, that's what college really feels like to me. Like, obviously I was doing so much, whether that was projects or different jobs or gigs. Like I had all these different internships and work-study roles and shit like that. But they were all very important for my development as a professional and creative. But like, honestly, like I think I grew the most as just a person, more than creatively or professionally. And I think I grew in those areas a lot. I just needed to grow a lot more as a person. So yeah, it was a struggle. I had to like basically like break down my ego, not eagle. Yeah. I had like multiple ego deaths almost like throughout college, where I was like, why am I being this person that I hate? Essentially, that's kind of what it was. And now I'm on the other side of it, and it's great. You have to suffer a little bit. Everyone does growing up. It's not fun. Worth it.
Kind of wrapping up the interview, how does that like growth as a person and everything kind of contribute into now applying for graduate school and everything? Like what was like your perspective now comparatively to, I guess, when you were applying to schools all the way back in high school and everything?
That's a great question, because like I've thought about that a lot. When I was in high school, I didn't actually think college was for me. In fact, I had a teacher tell me that I would never even make it into college. In 10th grade, a science teacher, he like interrogated me, like asked me if I was on drugs, all this other shit, and then was like, you're never gonna make it to college. He thought I would flunk high school, honestly, just based off of like how I was doing in this class. And I wasn't doing well, obviously, but like it was a lot to endure from this adult. And so that was just kind of like what I was thinking at the time. It was like, oh, maybe I won't make it to that. But then I realized, like, if I really wanted to find myself, who I needed to be, I needed to make it to college. Because like otherwise, like, where was I going to go? I would still have to live with my parents in Egypt. And I knew, like, it was nothing against Egypt. It's like I knew I needed to find a different place to figure out who I was, frankly. And I knew I needed to not live under my parents' roof as much as I love both my mom and dad. I just knew I needed to be independent. And I don't think there was a lot of trust from really anyone in my life that I could be. And maybe that was valid, but I needed to figure it out anyways. Even if I was going to fuck it up, I needed to figure it out. Like, it was important. So during those last 2 years of high school, I kind of took every easy class I could just to, get A's. Like, it didn't matter how hard they were. I just literally needed to get my GPA up. And I did that. Like, all my people from high school will not believe me when I say this, because their perspective of me was that I was like a shit student. And like, in some ways, yes. But like, all my math teachers really were pushing me to eventually go into higher level math. And I didn't, because I was just like, I don't really care about this for one, and also now I just need to get my GPA up. So I did the lowest level of math that I could, called Math Studies in the International Baccalaureate program. And as I was doing that, like, my teacher ended up really liking me, and by the end of high school, he actually gave me like the math award. And like, there was this whole ceremony. I was up on stage with all these other people, and I was like, I got this math award, and I felt so bitter about it. I never even thanked him, sorry. But like, I never even thanked him, because I was so bitter that I left high school with some award for underachieving. And I was like, I'm going to fix this. When I get into college, that is going to be like my number one priority, to leave with something that I'm actually proud of. So that was my goal. I was like, I just needed to get into college just to escape, and then I also wanted to leave with something that I was proud of. And I guess you could say that I left with a lot of things I was proud of from college, but I think that winning that screenwriting award for Coat, like, that was so redemptive. Like, I needed that. I was like, okay, like, all these things that people were saying about me, that I was like, a shit student, like, I would fail in life because I didn't lock in during high school. Like, they were wrong. Like, I just needed the space and the resources to be able to like figure myself out so that I could, actually do what I want and do it well. Still, I struggled in college because I was very shy. I didn't seek out, mentorship very well. I struggled with networking, and I just don't think I took full advantage of the education system. In fact, I was still very bitter about it because of my experience in high school and even previously. I neglected the actual education of it and just kind of took advantage of the resources I got from it to make my own shit and to like figure that out. But now as I'm applying to grad school, like you said, bringing it all back to that is like, okay, now I actually know what I want to do within the education system. Like, I want to have that network and that community of like other writers and filmmakers to like work with and like, give feedback to and get feedback from, and a mentor, as a professor, and actually engage with the academia of it all and stuff like that. Because going back to like all the way in elementary school, I actually really liked school. It's just like I became very bitter about it as I grew up because of, other shit. And it's like, I feel like I'm finally back to square one where I'm like, okay, I actually would really enjoy this now. And I kept telling myself, like, it's a shame that I graduated college when I did, because it's like now I'm at the point in my life where I feel like I could really utilize it. And, if you had told me in high school that I would go to grad school, I would have told you you're fucking stupid. Like, you're not being serious. Like, that's not for me, But, things change, time heals all wounds, and I grew the fuck up. And it's not a sure thing yet. Like, I applied, but like, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Amazing.
It's possible I go to grad school. Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit with grad school and Amar's Opalo, But what does the future look like for you?
I hate that question.
You don't have to answer.
No, I'll entertain it, but I won't fully answer it. So I don't like that question because I used to be someone that would think about the future a lot. And I like I'm going to butcher the idiom, but like it's something like you make plans and God laughs, essentially. It's like if you try to make a timeline for your life and shit like that, it'll never go according to how you plan it. Like it just won't. And for me, it's more so like focusing on what's happening right in front of me. And like obviously I can have hopes about like what will end up happening, but like actually putting a timeline to it and like having expectations for what the future holds is like that feels wrong to me. Like just from past experiences of how that's failed. You know, you set expectations and then you set yourself up to not meet those expectations and then you get disappointed by that. Whereas like if you don't set any expectations, then you'll never get disappointed. And don't apply that philosophy to every aspect of life, obviously, but like I think for like career wise, professionally, I'm just like we'll just take it one step at a time. I just want to work on my feature script right now. Like I'm getting like different rounds of feedback on that and working on that, and it's my first ever feature, so like that's a whole process. It's a big commitment, but I'm liking how it's shaping out, and I think other people really appreciate it. I think it's very meaningful because I don't always write things that are very meaningful. Sometimes I write shit that's just stupid, and that's fun too. There's a place for that. But I'm just very excited for what the future holds. But I don't have an expectation for what that means yet. You know what I mean? It's just like I'm just excited, basically.
Oh, that's amazing. Last question. And then look into the camera for this one. Plug all of your social medias. Plug anything that you want. All your projects. Anything. This is your time to plug whatever you want.
Okay. Plugs. Fuck, I don't even know. Let's see. Pavilion Studios. That's like mine and Josh's like baby. Essentially, we co-parent this like multimedia studio where we make short films and other shit. Kind of like wherever you want. That's where Mars Apollo is. That's where my documentary is. Like all my shitty short films from undergrad are there, and future stuff will be there. So Babylon Studios on Instagram and YouTube. You can find that. God, what else? I mean, my Instagram is currently private, but you can find my like artsy Instagram that I hardly ever use. It has some stuff on there if you want to see like visual art. Tira Garage. So it's like my name, Tira, Tira, and then Garage. I don't know. Titous.com. I do a lot of writing on there, like blogging, and I never share it with anyone, really, but there's some good stuff on there too, I guess. Oh, and go to the John Waters showcases. I forget what the actual name for it is, but if you go to a famous studio on Instagram, you can find the information for the John Waters showcases. It's like a talent show, basically, all themed and inspired around John Waters and his work. And it'll be in Philadelphia and in New York, so East Coast, pull up.
The end. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. It was fun.
Yeah, that was a good interview. I really liked it.